If you've installed a SharkBite fitting and it's leaking, here are 6 mistakes I've made when using SharkBite fittings that caused them to leak and how to fix them. Hopefully, one of these will help you identify why your SharkBite fitting is leaking. Mistake number 1 is the copper pipe not being clean. Unless your pipe is brand new, it's likely going to look like this with some dust and some discoloration. Now this could cause the O-ring inside the SharkBite fitting not to seal properly to the copper pipe. You should always clean copper pipes at least 1.5 inches away from the end of the pipe using plumber's sanding cloth. You may read that SharkBite does not recommend the use of sandpaper. I checked with a technical support expert at SharkBite, and he told me that as long as you're using the proper plumber's sanding cloth just to clean the pipe, that's fine. The reason they don't recommend regular sandpaper is that it is much harsher and it can damage the actual copper pipe. Also, make sure when you're sanding, you do not sand too much so that you change either the shape of the copper pipe or the diameter of the copper pipe. If you used a pipe cutter to cut the pipe, then the end should be fairly smooth. But if you ended up having to use a saw to cut the copper pipe, make sure you use the plumber's sanding cloth to try to smooth out that cut end as much as you can. Mistake number 2 is not cutting the end of the pipe straight. The cut end of the pipe, whether it's copper or PEX, needs to be a clean 90 degrees. It can't be on an angle. That flat end of the pipe is required to fit properly into the SharkBite fitting so that it doesn't cause a leak. When you're cutting a copper pipe, it's easy to get a 90-degree cut if you use a pipe cutter, where it snaps onto the copper pipe and then you rotate it around a number of times to cut through the pipe. If you have to use a saw, it is going to take more care to make sure you get that 90-degree flat end after you've cut it. For PEX pipe, you can use a pipe cutter as well, which is what I did early on. It does take quite a while to rotate it around and around, much longer than a PEX cutter, which is what I bought. And this is where I ran into problems. PEX pipe comes in a coil wound up, so it's hard to actually hold it straight to get that flat 90-degree cut. With some practice, I learned how to do it. Make sure you practice and use the pipe cutter to cut that clean 90-degree end. Mistake 3 is not using the SharkBite reaming tool to ream the cut end of the pipe. When I started using SharkBite fittings, I got lucky because the pipe cutter cuts a nice smooth end on the PEX pipe. Once I started using the PEX cutting tool though, that's where I ran into problems. Because the end was not smooth, it did not seal properly in the SharkBite fitting. I had tried to be cheap and not buy the SharkBite reaming tool. Don't be cheap like I was. This was by far the biggest source of leaks that I had. Once I got the tool and properly reamed each end of the pipe, all those leaks stopped. The tool has a cutting disc that protrudes into each of the openings. This cutting disc is what smooths out the end of the pipe when you rotate the reaming tool around the pipe. Use the reaming tool on each end of the pipe, whether it's copper or PEX, to make sure that it is properly smooth. This was confirmed by the technical support expert I spoke to at SharkBite, who said this is a critical step that you must not skip. Here you can see the shaved off part of the PEX pipe on the outside of the tool. Now that sharp end of the PEX pipe has turned into a smooth end that will seal properly in the SharkBite fitting. Mistake 4 is not using the reaming tool to mark the depth on the pipe that you need to insert the SharkBite fitting. The reaming tool is also a depth tool, so you can mark on the pipe the correct depth that you have to push the SharkBite fitting on in order to seat it properly and not have any leaks because it wasn't pushed on far enough. When I started, I just used a measuring tape to measure the depth that the SharkBite fitting needed to go onto the pipe. That was a big mistake. Because I was not as accurate as SharkBite needs, when I pushed the fitting on, I was kind of guessing whether did I actually push it on enough or not. By using the correct depth tool, you can always assure yourself that the fitting is properly on the pipe. Fit the tool over the end of the pipe and then use a permanent marker to mark on the pipe. I usually mark it on two sides just because then I can always make sure I see that mark when I'm pushing the SharkBite fitting on. Mistake 5 is not pushing the SharkBite fitting all the way on to the pipe. Once you've made the mark on the pipe, make sure when you're pushing that SharkBite fitting on, it goes all the way to that mark that you've made on the pipe. I used the SharkBite Max slip ball valve in a recent video and found that it is much easier to push onto the pipe than the original SharkBite fittings that I started with. I'll link to that video up above and the description down below if you wanted to see that. If the line on the pipe is hard to see because the lighting isn't that great, make sure that you get a light to look at it, maybe even use your camera if you need to take a photo to zoom in on it to make sure that the fitting is pushed all the way to that line that you marked on the pipe with the reaming and depth tool. Mistake 6 is having a pipe segment too long. If you have a short pipe segment between two SharkBite fittings, as I had many of when I did our powder room, make sure you measure that segment very carefully. If you make it too long, like I did, it causes the pipe to tilt in the fitting at each end. This does not allow the O-ring to properly seal all around. It can cause a leak. Once I recut that section to the proper length and installed it, the leak went away. If you've made one of these mistakes and you have to remove a pipe from a SharkBite fitting, you need to know how to do that properly and be aware of some potential issues when reusing SharkBite fittings. Only use the approved collar or tongs from SharkBite to remove a pipe from a SharkBite fitting. This can take a fair amount of effort, especially with the original SharkBite fittings. But do this carefully so you don't damage either the fitting or the outside of the pipe. Now, SharkBite will tell you that their fittings are not intended to be reused. Now, I understand why they say that. Because when you take it on and off a number of times, it reduces the probability that that seal is going to be correct inside the fitting. Now, my experience is I have taken a SharkBite fitting off of a pipe, reinstalled it on the pipe, and most of the time that has worked. If I've ever had to take it on and off more than twice, usually what I'll do is just replace the fitting so I don't run that risk of it not sealing properly. Now, that's not official SharkBite recommendations or anything like that. That's just my experience, what I've felt comfortable with. Knowing about the potential issues, you can make your own decision about how you may want to reuse a SharkBite fitting. SharkBite fittings make tackling plumbing projects in your home a lot easier because you don't have to learn how to solder with a torch or invest in expensive fastener systems. If you're using SharkBite fittings, make sure you don't make one of the 6 mistakes that I've made. If you do have a leak after using a SharkBite fitting, check to see if you've made one of these mistakes and correct it. I'll link to some of the common SharkBite fittings and tools in the description down below. If you want to see me install a SharkBite fitting in my home, watch this video. Thanks for watching.